Hello everyone, back again to continue the Redux series. Two colors as it was before, but this time for Golgari, so black and green. Golgari is closer to my favorite colors. I like anything with black in it. I think it's incredibly versatile and it complements other colors really well. You get a lot of graveyard themes. It's something I really get behind. You also get some pretty good removal too. So next to Orzhov, you can understand why I like this color combination. Gives you more ways of solving problems. So number 10 here, we have Vraska Golgari Queen, the only planeswalker on this list, and obviously the only Vraska. This one is my favorite. She's cheap, you can get her out there pretty easily. Her plus is reasonable, you get card draw, you have to sacrifice a permanent. Her minus is good removal, and her ult is a win con. I think that's a formula for a good planeswalker and being useful in relevant ways. That's an emblem you get where you can win the game just by dealing combat damage. I like the other Vraskas and they're just as playable. I just think that this one has the best overall abilities. Number 9, we have Poison Tip Archer. Pretty much the same kind of effect as Blood Artist and those kinds of creatures, where if a creature dies, you get to have an opponent lose a life. You have so many that do similar things. Poison Tip Archer is perfect because not only is it something that sits on the field a lot like a Blood Artist, but it has reach and death touch, making it surprisingly relevant on the board. You're almost never going to block with a Blood Artist or a Zulaport Cutthroat because they're too tiny. This has reach, it has 3 toughness, it has death touch. You can stop so many creatures, in addition to doing everything you normally would with your Blood Artist. Overall, just a fantastic creature. And then number 8, we have Abrupt Decay. Spells that can't be countered are always good, even if they're not super powerful, even if they can only hit certain kinds of permanents, which in this case it's CMC 3 or lower. And that's fine, that's perfectly fine. Because for only 2 mana, and again, it can't be countered, you get to deal with something that's usually going to be pretty common. CMC cards 3 are pretty good. We have Food Chain, Necropotence, Ashnod's Altar, a lot of combo pieces that are that cheap and easy to deal with because of an Abrupt Decay. It's also something I recommend for competitive EDH for that same reason. Then number 7, we have Deathrite Shaman. Mana Dorks are really good. This is a Mana Dork that's conditional. You need to have things in the graveyard to exile. You need to be able to exile lands in order to get that mana, which isn't really too hard, but the beauty here is that you have other things that you can exile, so if there's a creature someone's trying to get back from their graveyard, you can just exile it in response, solve that problem, and that's why Deathrite Shaman is so good, because worst case scenario, it's a Mana Dork, but you really love it because it just punishes graveyard decks. You want to reanimate something? I don't think so. I have a response that's only going to cost me 1 mana. Number 6 is Fiend Artisan. Now this is something that's very similar to a Birthing Pod. It's a little bit different on a creature. It's a little bit different because instead of just sacrificing the creature and getting the search, you do have to pay mana and do this. So it is a worse Birthing Pod, but when you consider this is an ability on a 2-mana creature, I think that's pretty powerful, and it also gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard, so it's not just a body that has to sit out there, you can deal some damage with it too. Pretty strong ability anytime that you can just sacrifice a creature and then tutor up another one, put it right into play. That's pretty crazy. And then number 5, we have Casualties of War. 6 mana, sorcery, you can choose 1 or more, and this card is fantastic and so underrated. I don't see it enough, even though it should be in every green-black deck. You have 5 modes here. You can destroy a target artifact, a creature, an enchantment, a land, and a planeswalker. You can do all of those. Targeted removal is pretty good because you don't have to sacrifice your own board. Usually for 6 mana, you have to use board wipes to deal with problems. With this, you don't have to. You can be selective, something that is a lot more one-sided. That way you keep your board intact, and you have the perfect problem solver because it deals with every kind of permanent. If there's a Rogue's Passage, you can deal with it. If there's a good planeswalker, you can deal with it. Artifact, enchantment, creature, very versatile. And these kinds of removal spells always age well in the format. And then number 4, we have another good removal spell. We have Pernicious Deed, but it's not a sorcery, it's an enchantment. For 3 mana, you have an ability for X, sacrifice Pernicious Deed, destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with converted mana cost X or less. This is one of the craziest cards that you can still use, and it has aged pretty well. There are so many ways of bringing back cheap enchantments. You could have a Sun Titan, you could have anything like that, and you have a reusable board wipe. because it's so much easier to bring back enchantments than it is instants and sorceries. You do only deal with a few permanent types, so it doesn't deal with planeswalkers or even certain lands, but in most situations, it's going to deal with everything you need it to deal with. And then number 3, we have the Gitrog monster. Probably one of the best things about green and black is the engines. The engines in green-black are just insane, and the Gitrog is probably the best one. You are forced to sacrifice a land, but whenever you sacrifice a land, you get to draw a card, which is something that's incredibly abusable in landfall strategies where you can easily just get lands back. You have Crucible of Worlds. If I had to say what kind of strategy is the most powerful in Commander from the casual perspective, it's easily landfall. The more resources you have in terms of mana, the more you can produce, the more you can do, the more likely you are to win. And then number 2, we have Marin of Clan Neltoth. Probably the most powerful thing next to the engines is the sacrifice synergies. You have ways of really benefiting off of your graveyard, and Marin for the longest time has been one of the best ways that you can benefit off of your graveyard as a commander. You can easily bring back creatures. If not straight to the field, if you don't have enough experience counters, they just go back to your hand, which is far from a bad thing. Probably the most abusable thing about Marin is the fact that some of the most common creatures in the game just sacrifice themselves pretty easily, like Sakura Tribe Elder. So you have ways of just constantly bringing it back. Worst case scenario, you just do this with creatures like this and get a bunch of lands. Kind of like Gitrog, and maybe if you wanted to, you could flip those two. Make Gitrog number 2, make this one 3. I personally like Marin a little bit more. I think she's just a bit more powerful, because when I play Golgari, I want to play graveyard decks. Alright, now before I go on to number 1, I want to talk about some honorable mentions, and we have more removal here. We have Putrefy and Death Sprout. Can't really go wrong. I was actually surprised to look over how much removal we had, but you can deal with most permanents, most problems in green and black, because you get the good combination of non-creature removal and creature removal, so they just complement each other really well. And then we have another very powerful card. We have Jarad Golgari Lichlord. I've always liked Jarad. I've always recommended Jarad. Very underrated win con and commander option. You always need to be able to put up a big creature though, but other than that, he is pretty decent. Number 1 is Assassin's Trophy. You destroy target permanent an opponent controls. Instant speed, its controller may search their library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield. Amazing card. Abrupt Decay can't be countered, but it can't deal with the same kind of cards that you can deal with Assassin's Trophy. Here you can deal with everything. And like I said with Anguished Unmaking, if you can deal with everything, you're pretty much good to go. This can literally deal with everything, so long as it can be destroyed. You do worry about giving your opponent a land that they could use, but if you're destroying the best thing on their board, you're not too worried about that. As I mentioned, Golgari has some pretty strong removal, so yes, I do consider this to be the best of the best in Golgari. When it comes to removal, I think you have pretty much everything you need. That's why it's so strong in Commander, people. You just have so much that you can do, and Golgari just continues to be above average at everything. But anyway, let me know what you think about the top 10 cards in the Golgari colors. I had a lot of fun making this video. You can't really go wrong if you want to make a good commander deck in these colors. Very well rounded, and there's a ton of depth. Anyway, you all have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next time.